This week on Who Corner to Corner, we're joined by RAFAELLA Marcus, who is a relatively new name to the world of Doctor Who.
Writing a story for a specific Doctor, if I'd been writing for a different Big Finish range, I wouldn't have pitched that story. That was a 13th Doctor and Yaz story. Yeah, I think one of the other ones I pitched was, I was like, or women's football in the First World War. That's that's interesting. The fact that the Violet Hour is set in Wapping is a reference to Talons of Weng Chiang. I mean, I feel like I ended up writing by accident, which I think is probably something that quite a lot of people say. But it's my second career. I was a theatre director for quite a long time, and every single time there was a gasp at this reveal, and I just feel like that's the high that you're always chasing. Generally, I think if someone else in the room is going, can we just sort of stop and think about this line for a second, I am liable to trust that there is a good reason. Naively was not expecting that strength of reaction to it, honestly.
Oh, really?
Again, no producer, she didn't want me. She was like the Thasmin fans are going to go insane for this.
Hello and welcome to Who Corner to Corner podcast. My name is Jeff, as it has been for the last 4 years, and his name is Paul. How are you this evening?
Yes, I'm good. I'm very well, thank you, Jeff.
Good. Well, we've got a special guest with us tonight, haven't we?
Yes.
Just going to dive straight into things. We're joined by RAFAELLA Marcus, who is a relatively new name to the world of Doctor Who, but one that's made a fairly substantial impression recently with her first 13th Doctor audio, which was the Violet Hour, which we both listened to recently and got slightly spooked out by. So we're here to talk all about that, as well as a whole load of other things. So good evening, RAFAELLA. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited.
Good. Well, thank you for joining us. Yeah. So we've got a load of questions here because we want to find out all about you and, of course, the Violet Hour as well. But we're going to go back in time before that, which is appropriate for a Doctor Who podcast. And we're going to start at the beginning. So tell us what first got you into writing? Was there a moment where you thought, yes, this is what I want to do?
I mean, I feel like I ended up writing by accident, which I think is probably something that quite a lot of people say. But it's my second career. I was a theatre director for quite a long time, and I trained as that. And I was like, right, this is it for me forever. I like being in charge. And then we had this pandemic, and that kind of put an end to a lot of projects that I had on the boil. And just before that, I started writing this play. And I worked a lot on new writing. I worked with some fantastic writers. And because of that, I'd sort of been going, I can't possibly write anything. Writing's really difficult. Look how hard it is. But I had this play idea that kind of wouldn't leave me alone. Just this quite dark take on a Greek myth. And I was just sort of writing down bits and pieces as it went, and then I started showing it to people, and then they said, "Well, yeah, you should do something with this." And it was all lined up to have a production in 2020, and then again, this pandemic happened.
Bloody thing.
But that was then what got me into writing audio, because while we were waiting for things to kind of come back a bit more to normal so we could do the show, I got approached to write some audio in the meantime. So I feel like everything in my writing career has happened by accident in the luckiest and most brilliant possible way, where it has been a case of, I feel like me putting little bits of myself out there through blogs and Twitter, RIP, Twitter that was, and all these little ways where it was just me kind of just being this mouthy person with an opinion about stuff, that then led to people going, do you want to write some of this down? And then that led to people going, we could give you some money for some of this.
That's always good, isn't it? Yeah. It's always a bonus.
I'm the luckiest person in the world, so.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. So that first theatre piece, was that SAP, or was that something before that?
No, that was SAP. Which is a sort of kind of horror thriller, although I'd say it starts off as a rom-com about a bisexual woman who kind of doesn't really use that word to describe herself, and has meets a man, has a one-night stand with him, and then meets a woman who she falls deeply in love with, and they start a relationship. She just kind of lets her girlfriend believe that she's gay rather than bisexual because it's sort of easier and it's the path of least resistance. And then she is introduced to her girlfriend's brother, who is of course the man that she had a one-night stand with at the start of the play, and everything, all the dominoes kind of knocked down from there.
Well, that's a great twist, isn't it? I love it.
I haven't read it, but I was just kind of I'll just because the play is out in book form on Amazon. It's published by Faber and Faber, if I'm not mistaken. So I was kind of reading through the synopsis, and it looks like there's a lot of themes there about identity, about transformation, about being sort of comfortable and yet strange at the same time. Would I be right in that? Or
yeah, I think absolutely. It's like I said, it's sort of inspired by the myth of Daphne and Apollo, which is a Greek myth where he is pursuing her to assault her essentially, and she is saved, and heavy air quotes, by turning into a tree. And I always thought that was so awful. Like,
just weird as well.
Why do you want to be a tree? Like, who wants to be a tree? That's terrible. And it's supposed to be a happy ending to this myth. And I think it was because it wouldn't leave me alone. And I love myths, and I love folklore, and kind of a very sort of drenched in that all that sort of kind of oral storytelling, essentially. And it's not even my favourite myth, but it wouldn't leave me alone, and I think that's what
stayed in your head, right?
Became this play. But yeah, I think also, like I said, that twist in the middle is probably what cemented that I was going to write more, because it got a gasp from the audience every night. And before the first, just work in progress showing of it, I was like, everyone's going to see this coming from a mile away. I don't know why I touted that, but every single performance, because it did eventually have its full run, and then it went on tour, and it had a London run, so it had lots of iterations, and every single time there was a gasp at this reveal, and I just feel like that's the high that you're always chasing.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
I kind of came into it going, this might be it, this might be the only thing I ever write, and then I was like, oh, you can press the levers of how an audience responds to things.
Yeah. Did you kind of alter the script slightly? Is it as you learnt that, or learnt how to get that reaction, how to play on that audience kind of vibe, or did you keep it as it was?
That moment was pretty much the same from the start. There are so many bits of it that did change as it went along. I mean, I rewrote the ending multiple times. I only really landed on the version I wanted to stick with, I think, 2 days before we had our first performance, and the cast were not very happy with me, but it was the right thing to do. Like, it was that it took that long to get to the right end, like so much so that it went to print sort of 2 weeks earlier than that. So the ending that in the first print run was not completely different, but not what I wanted it to be. And then fortunately the first print run sold out. So when we went to a second printing, they went, "Oh, gee, you said you maybe wanted to change a few things." And I was like, yes.
That's got to be quite a good thing with plays, in a way. I mean, certainly in the performance rehearsal kind of stage, where you can sort of hear your work and see it performed and see it come to life, and think, well, maybe that part could just do a little nudge here, and I thought of that, and this would be,
Absolutely.
So you can do it in real time, really, can't you? Whereas when you're making a TV or film,
once it's out, that's it, isn't it?
Well, and you often don't realise until the edit process, actually that bit's not quite working, we need another scene or something like that, But with theatre and rehearsal, or even when you're playing it on the night, you could sort of still tweak things.
I'm nodding a lot in this non-visual medium.
If you're only listening, Rafaella's nodding. If you're watching on YouTube, nodding. You'll see her.
It completely. And I think it has informed all of my writing after that has come since, no matter what medium it's for. That trying to keep a kind of collaborative spirit alive in it, even when, like you said, the kind of the constraints of the medium kind of lean against that. I just think actors are so good at knowing, actors are amazing at knowing what is sayable and how to, you know, even when you have a heightened tone or a heightened universe to something, they are so good at kind of going, I'm just bumping up against this line, and then if you have a good relationship, then you can kind of unpick what it is that isn't quite feeling right. And I would say I very rarely in my career so far have kind of really had to fight for a line where I've kind of really felt like the actor or the director kind of wasn't getting why it was there. I mean, I'm pretty unprecious about my own, you know, generally I think if someone else in the room is going, can we just sort of stop and think about this line for a second, I am liable to trust that there is a good reason.
They might be onto something, I guess. Yeah.
There's quite a famous story of Harrison Ford saying to
You're going to quote Star Wars.
I know exactly.
We know what he's going to say, right?
And he, you know, it's right, you know, and if you know, if you've written a piece, but you know, people are kind of having trouble getting it out, or it doesn't sound quite right, I think it not being precious about it, as long as, you know, whatever information or meaning needs to come out, it doesn't necessarily matter what words come out to get there for it, you know. So,
well, and they spot stuff you've overlooked. I mean, there was a line in The Violet Hour. There was a line where I had the word mugged in there. I think so. You've been mugged for your shoes, and the actor went, "That's actually quite a modern word, and we're in 1926," and suggested an alternative. And I was like, "Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Make me look good."
Yeah, yeah. Take that credit. Take the credit for
makes
it.
A piece, it just adds to the sort of genuine kind of credibility of the thing, doesn't it? I suppose.
Yeah.
It is. I think, especially when you're trying to write voices, you know, a multiplicity of voices that sound distinct from each other and have a kind of array of human kind of quirks and mannerisms to them. That is also a place where actors are so brilliant, and they kind of absolutely shine at sort of going, you know, because I feel like the cliche is sort of the actor going like, I just don't think my character would do this. But in my opinion, like in my experience, that's very rare. And I think usually when an actor is saying something along those lines, they are actually right. Usually,
particularly if they've played the part
for
a long time,
like you said.
You know, before.
Yes.
Yeah. Just going back to sort of the early days, and we talk a bit more about SAP in a moment. But was there something, you know, what was the first piece of writing or the first theatre thing that you saw that really kind of, you know, inspired you, that, you know, kind of led you to going into directing?
That's a really, really good question. When I started directing, I thought that I wanted everything I directed to be Shakespeare or Greek. So I wanted to do these big operatic kind of stories that had this resonant sort of almost mythological level to them. And I ended up not doing that, partly because it's quite hard to get the opportunities to do those things actually when you're starting out. And I have done a lot of work with Shakespearean texts, but not necessarily, you know, these huge productions that I wanted to, but I did. I was lucky enough to go to a university that had a really good student drama scene, and I got to direct several big casts at university. And I kind of started off as doing quite small things, kind of two-handers and stuff. And then my ambition grew, and the opportunity was there to actually to give it a go. And I was being inspired by seeing things like Earthquakes in London, which Mike Bartlett play that was on at the National. I remember seeing that and kind of which is this huge ensemble piece that is basically about how we're all screwed by climate change. But again, it's this sort of odyssey through London. I think mostly takes place over one day, but it also goes backwards and forwards in time as well.
Okay.
And I kind of remember seeing things like that. I saw a bunch of fantastic Shakespeare productions as well over the years, like Complicité's Measure for Measure is one that really lives with me. All things I think that brought home the uniqueness of theatre as a medium for being able to represent things in a non-literal way essentially is a medium that absolutely thrives off of metaphor, and kind of a very brilliant director once described it to me as kind of when you put a tree on stage, it kind of becomes representative of all trees, and it becomes the park near where you grew up, and it becomes the Garden of Eden, and it and that's really the only medium that does that.
And you've got the audience in the same space as the performers, as the piece itself, kind of contributing to it with their energy, right? That's what I always felt anyway.
Absolutely. I think it does. I think plays of magic because it's not something that's happening on a stage, and it's not something that's happening in the audience. It's kind of happening in the air between those two things. And I think that's why I think I've come away from plays probably more radically disagreeing with the person that I saw it with than I have from again film or TV.
Are you still directing, or have you sort of moved on from that, or
I am still directing, but a lot less now. But a show that I directed a couple of years ago at Edinburgh, which is called Blubber by a very brilliant artist called Katie Greenall, is currently on tour. I should get my plug in. Would do a little tour of kind of theatres around the south and southeast of England. We finished the first leg of the tour, and it's coming back in a couple of weeks' time. But that's been the main thing I've been directing really. Over the last few years, and I've directed some audio, and I absolutely don't want to stop doing it. But I think there is a thing in sort of theatre industry of people sometimes struggling with how to categorize you when you do more than one thing, and I think possibly there's a bit of a sense sometimes of like, oh, you've crossed over to the other side, now you are a director and now you're a writer.
Right.
That's quite interesting. Do people like to pigeonhole you? I suppose they would, because then it makes it easy for agents to find you work, I guess. Would it? Or because I'd have thought spreading your net widely across different kind of skills would open you up to much more, open many more doors for you.
I think it makes the work better, definitely. I think part of the reason why SAP as my first piece of writing kind of hit the ground running in the way that it did was because I've been a director, a new writing director, and a dramaturg as well. So working with writers on how to make their work the most itself, I guess, is my best way of describing that. Because I've been doing that for years and had developed this sense of structure and what is innately and inherently dramatic. And I think those are the things really that then when I sat down to write my own piece of work, it was sort of going, okay, well, I wouldn't be satisfied watching something that didn't do X, Y, and Z. And I, every time I hit a point where I was like, right, I'm getting bored of my own writing. That's when I'm time to kind of switch something up. So definitely, I think working in multiple roles, they're all the same skills. They all feed into each other so much. But in terms of industry, I think that being very successful in one role sometimes comes at the expense of your work in the other roles.
It's interesting. There's a couple of the other big Finnish writers do theatre stuff as well, don't they? And I wonder if it's a similar firm like Tim Foley, didn't he, Paul?
That's right.
Yeah. So SAP performed at the Edinburgh Fringe, didn't it? And got quite a lot of critical acclaim. Did you go up there for it? What was that like?
I did. So I was there through the opening, and as I already said, I was rewriting until the last minute. So actually, kind of the first few days of being there, it was work. Like we were there for work. We had our last couple of days of rehearsal up in Edinburgh, and I was absolutely petrified. We've done previews at Southampton at Mast Theatre in Southampton, which was great. But I also again just knew the play wasn't finished yet. And again, time is ticking down to this opening night. We were on at Roundabout, which is a fantastic venue, which is Payne's Plough's pop-up in the round tent venue in Summerhall, alongside some brilliant writers. They're feeling like a complete fraud and an imposter, and sort of going, well, look, the director's brilliant and the cast is brilliant, and so I don't think people are going to have a bad time, but God, this is maybe the moment when everything comes crashing down around my ears. And I just remember watching the first couple of shows in this sort of state of absolutely heightened terror, And on the second show, Lynn Gardner came to review it, who is probably the biggest deal theatre critic to someone like me, so she used to be one of the lead critics for The Guardian, and she was reviewing for The Stage, I think, at that point. So, and her critical opinion was probably the one that mattered to me the most. And I said, our second show. So I was sitting there going, no, this is way too early. And then her review came out, and it was a really good review. And then I relaxed, because I was sort of like, all right, I don't really mind what people say about it after this point.
You got that, yeah.
But I didn't go and see a lot of other shows because it was just such a kind of a huge, mad few days. And then I went home for a few weeks, which was absolutely the right thing to do. Got to enjoy the audience responses kind of rolling in, and I came back in the last week for essentially a victory lap. And then I saw everyone else's work that I'd been too terrified to do.
Yeah.
That's great.
Brilliant.
So let's talk a little bit about Doctor Who for a bit. Were you a fan of the show growing up, or did that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
the classic question: Who was your first Doctor, and can you remember when you saw it? Or what kind of caught your attention with it? What moment?
I very vividly remember, because
Most people do. It's weird.
Yeah, I remember when it was, because I remember when the revival series was coming back, and I was in my teens, and both my parents were really excited, which I remember. That's what struck me as unusual, because they're not big like sci-fi genre people, but they were both like, "Oh yeah, Doctor Who! God, that was so scary when we were kids." Oh, it's really exciting that it's coming back. And I actually had my Duke of Edinburgh expedition on the weekend when Rose.
Right.
And this is obviously mid-2000s. There's no iPlayer or like catch up. You have to look in the TV guide to see when the rerun's going to be.
Oh, those old days,
I'm going to miss the first episode of this. But we camped in the grounds of a youth hostel, and I snuck into the youth hostel, and they were playing it in the TV room. So I watched the last 15 minutes of Rose, and I was like, I don't know what's going on, but this is great.
It's mad.
I love it. So yeah, and then I never missed an episode.
Brilliant.
I came home. I did manage to watch the whole episode finally.
I was going to ask you, did you manage to catch the rest of the bits you missed?
I did. Yeah. I did look in the TV guide and see when the rerun was.
20 years later, you've still not seen the first 40 minutes of it.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So your first Doctor Who was the first episode of the revival then, Rose? Yeah. Have you gone back and watched any of the old series since then? Have you indulged in any of them?
Yeah,
any faves?
I think I have watched something from each Doctor.
Have you? Yeah.
Now, but some more than others. So I definitely, and I was trying to get my husband into a bit more. He likes it like pretty well, but I'm the fan. And he was trying to get me into Magic the Gathering by being like, they're making a Doctor Who.
Oh, yes.
Jeff's man there.
Yeah. That's how I started playing Magic again.
I can't go with you on this one, but
no, me neither. I don't get it.
Paul
I haven't got the patience for it.
I realise I've been playing Magic again for 3 years. I think you can.
Have you?
I don't know if you can see that my
superstar there.
Magic box is there. Oh, just there.
Jeff moves out of camera, so to reveal something behind him on his shelf, ladies and gentlemen.
I've got
no idea what it is.
Range of sets there, but the Who one was brilliant. They did a really good job of kind of taking Who characters and making them work within the sort of world of magic and how all that plays and things, and giving characters game mechanics that fit them and stuff. It was brilliant. I would give it a go.
To myself, look, if I'm not going to get into Magic because they've made a Doctor Who deck, it's probably never going to happen for me.
That's me exactly. That I tried it. I just could not. I don't have the patience for. I just can't. I just can't. I love role playing games and all of that kind of thing. I love but the card games, they just don't work for me in my head. But it just can't. Nothing seems to land. It's like a barrier.
I don't have the patience, I think.
That's it.
Yeah, that's why you didn't like it, wasn't it? Yeah. And
because I was trying to get my husband into it, I showed him City of Death. So I was like, you'll like this one, which he did. And then I've sort of tried to go through and watch a lot of the a lot of the big kind of touch touchstones for classic Who, and a lot of the stories that are kind of held up as, this is a good one to kind of get a flavour of this Doctor. There's a bit of, in fact, the fact that the Violet Hour is set in Wapping is a reference to Talons of Wen Chiang, which obviously a very cancelable series.
Well, indeed.
For many reasons, but that is the last time. I think that's the only other time that we've had a Wapping set Doctor Who.
Yeah, I was trying to think. Was Resurrection of the Daleks wasn't far from there? I don't think. The old Docklands. Was it like Butler's Wharf? I think somewhere like that. So not too far from Wapping, but.
I mean, it's all the kind of Docklands, especially if you go back in time, as you can with this show, are such an atmospheric place, whether that's visual or audio.
Yeah, and that's a good point, actually, because when I was listening to the Violet Hour, I think there was part of me that immediately, even though it'd been explained that this is 1920s, not like 1880s or 1890s London, it still conjured those same kind of thoughts in my head, and I thought, no, we're after that. When he started talking about the Spanish flu, and I thought, no, think. But it's almost like you played on those tropes so brilliantly that I was in something, around about the time of Talons. So I wonder if
it is an incredibly interesting period of time. I think for that reason of I think if we were to be able to go back to the 1920s, it's 100 years ago to us.
Yeah. Good grief,
yeah. It would feel so alien, and it would be this world where they still do have, horse-drawn carts, and they still do have, I think they've got the ironmonger shank for scrap iron is a bit of scene setting in one of the scenes, and they still do have music hall. But it's the kind of dying end of a lot of Victorian stuff that's lingered on for kind of 20 years. And it's overlapping with the birth of the modern world, and you have cars and the wireless and this boom in technology and in science and in population kind of overlapping with all of these very Gaslight and Velvet kind of things.
Do you know what? You painted such a beautiful, evocative kind of place. I kind of feel like I'm there genuinely, and just imagine what it's like you said, it's so much of it is kind of dying and decaying, almost hanging on with its last grasping moments, and yet the newer, because I'm thinking as well, in the 1920s there's a lot of art going on, isn't it? We've got Art Deco, we've had Art Nouveau, we've got Surrealism sort of coming in, we've got Cubism, all of that kind of stuff, all these movements in art which are pushing the kind of the way people look at things, the way artists look at things, the way artists are trying to tell other, the populace to sort of look at things in a different way. And you've still got it clinging on to this old age, which is actually, and it's closer to the 1890s than it is to the 1960s or 1970s. So I'd never really thought of it like that before, but I think that's
one of the other reasons for it being 1926, as well as that being 100 years ago, is that is the year, I believe, the Wasteland by T.S. Eliot came out. The kind of and that's where the title of the episode comes from. The Violet Hour is a quote from he said, "The Violet Hour, when the eyes and back turn upwards from the desk," and that poem is. Is purposefully indefinable, but if it's about anything, it's potentially about trying to make sense out of a world that's become too big and chaotic to make sense of, and that's obviously in the wake of the First World War and quite possibly the Spanish flu epidemic, but also again, I think that was just this explosion. And the world became a very bewildering place. And you get modernism out of it. You get the artistic movement of modernism is born.
We were pondering this, weren't we, when we reviewed it, didn't we, Jeff? This whole, what it must have been like back then as well to suffer, two catastrophes quite close to each other. To be sort of you've got a lot of newness dangled on one end, but is it affecting you on the street level, the ordinary person who's trying to just earn enough cash just to keep the roof over their heads, keep the landlords at bay and stuff like that. And with the population kind of just, was it a third of it? The
well,
third
yeah,
of the population
we
wiped
looked it
out,
up, didn't we? And did it say that back then the population of the whole world was like 1.5 billion, which is absolutely crazy to think. Like, the world we live in now, what would it have been like going into London with
emptier?
Yeah, it's like when you think about it, like, oh my God, that's unless there's like a billion people in London, but things like that, it's kind of hard to get your head around how different the world would have been in all sorts of ways, at any point in history, really. But when you kind of hear that, so yeah, it was really evocative, the story. But yeah, we'll come back to it in a minute. So, what is there something about Doctor Who that excites you as a writer? Is there things that you can do with it that you can't do anywhere else? Because I always feel like Who is creatively unlimited. You could almost do anything you want within it, not just kind of different genres, but any kind of story. There'd be some way you could kind of MacGuffin, almost anything to happen in it. Do you know what I mean?
I completely, and that's the draw, I think, isn't it? It's sort of got that in common with. It's one of my favourite shows alongside the X-Files, which I think is also a show that could be that contained the scope to change genre and to be about whatever it wanted to be from a week to week basis. And Doctor was even more unlimited than that, because you also, I think, have to be, from a writing point of view, writing a story for a specific Doctor. If I'd been writing for a different Big Finish range, I wouldn't have pitched that story. That was a 13th Doctor and Yaz story. So it's so contextual and I think reactive in a way. You end up just having you have to write the episode that you would want to see for that Doctor. And I think, which is also amazingly what Big Finish allows you to do as well, I think, is, in a way, I shouldn't say this in a way that's absolutely not reductive and is highly complimentary. It's like getting to write fan fiction professionally.
And it's signed off by the BBC. It's
in the sense where I think anyone who's a fan of the show has probably come up with what their ideal episode would be for any Doctor companion combination. And that's incredible that this is the same show. It does have a set of rules to it, but actually those rules are quite, they're so fundamental that they're actually quite simple.
Yeah.
And within the huge canon of Doctor Who, you also will, find episodes that contradict each other in terms of what the Doctor is and isn't allowed to do. And so it's this great gift as a writer, where I think first and foremost Doctor Who is an emotional show. I think it's got it always comes down to what the beating heart of an episode is.
Yeah, if you don't care about the people in it, no amount of robots and explosions and aliens matter. It's same with any decent film or TV. Really, you got to care about the people in it and the heart of it all.
It's almost like finding the humanity through whatever horrors kind of unfold, isn't it? I guess
there's something very, one of the kind of very consistent touch points of the show, touchstones of the show, I think, is the Doctor, no matter which Doctor it is, the Doctor's kind of love of humanity, even when they're frustrated with humanity, and their fascination with humanity. And again, there's huge scope in that to be, with the different Doctors, is this a Doctor who is kind of studying humanity and examining them a bit more, or is this a Doctor who's kind of trying to pretend to be a bit more human, or is this a Doctor who kind of thinks that they are human? And again, so there's a huge scope within the different characters of people that we call the Doctor. But that's the point, is that the show kind of can't help but in the end up being a celebration of what it means to be human, even when that's about dragging the kind of the ugliest impulses out into the light.
Yeah. And I think that's, I think you're right. I think that does apply to every Doctor in some way, with a slightly different kind of perspective. But it seems to me, I mean, the 13th Doctor in particular is quite well known for the kind of, certainly in comparison to the 12th Doctor, has been quite compassionate, or strives towards being compassionate. And it's I mean, that's one of the things that kind of draws me to the 13th Doctor. Do you think? I mean, how did her voice kind of play in your head? Did you have to rewatch them again, or was it just kind of there? Did you just sort of lean into what you knew?
I rewatched a few. Actually, the thing that I watched the most was the video that Jodie did from inside her cupboard.
The lockdown video.
Yeah. During the pandemic, because it was so doctory. And and
you know,
it really was.
And that really kind of summed up her Doctor in that sort of couple of minutes. The hope, the optimism, the compassion. It was all kind of there. And like you're sort of saying, each Doctor has similar traits, but they're pushed up and down depending on the Doctor and the way they sort of regard and interact with humans, for example. And I think with Jodie's Doctor, that kind of hope and compassion was pushed up beyond a maximum. Quite often.
I was really drawn to. I think there's a really interesting contradiction in the 13th Doctor of she is pushing herself towards that hope and compassion, but she also shuts down and becomes cold a lot more readily than some of the other Doctors we've seen. Kind of, she's not wearing her heart on her sleeve.
Oh yeah, she keeps a lot of that, wrapped up, doesn't she?
Yeah, I love that, because it's almost like, here's someone who wants, who wants to go around. For the first time we get a Doctor who actively wants to go and have tea around somebody's house. That's never really sort of been a thing before. And yet, the closer she gets to that, the more she kind of retreats and sort of walls herself up. And, she's quite happy to receive, but not quite so happy to give, so it's still a very sort of one-sided relationship.
But with
and I think Yaz kind of starts to pull, that relationship she's got with Yaz starts to tug on that quite a bit until it, sort of starts breaking towards the end of the run. I love that arc.
And that, I think, that ends up being quite a beautifully kind of tragic relationship with Yaz, because it is sort of, she the Doctor wants to say it and she can't. And I think the more time she spends with Yaz, the more she knows that about herself, that she can't say it and she'll never say it.
And Yaz is wanting, answers and to know more, isn't she? And the Doctor won't open up on it. Like I don't remember that she ever really explains the Timeless Child stuff and all of those revelations. She just kind of shuts it down, doesn't she? And they do have a bit of an argument at one point. Yaz wants to know, doesn't she? And she won't tell her. So yeah, you're right. There's sort of quite a strong contradiction, that there's a lot of internal stuff that she keeps to herself, and but while simultaneously trying to push hope and make people the best they can be, whilst not kind of dealing with their own stuff and people.
It's one of the reasons I think I kind of settled on that I pitched to write an episode about grief, where there was a kind of literally a creature that was kind of forcing you to you could literally look in your head and kind of see everyone who you've ever lost.
Because you touch on that, don't you, when it goes into 13's head, and realizes the kind of extent of the loss that she's carrying with her and things, and it's when it gets kind of verbalized like that, you realize just actually as a character, how much the Doctor has kind of dealt with over the incarnations, and not just companions moving on, but people dying, and all of that. It's actually quite awful, really.
Yeah, well, and that's why I think for me that has to be a 13th Doctor story, because she's a Doctor who'd have to be forced to look at that, whereas 10th Doctor would be weeping from the minute face to face.
It's true, yeah. The 12th would get angry, it'd drive it, fuel his anger and rage at, the bitterness of it all.
Clara would have to give him cue cards on how to behave about it,
But I like that, because that dynamic in a relationship there, and we've seen it a few times, and it's there in the Violet Hour, because obviously the Doctor shares, she shares that with oh gosh, what's her name? The medium.
Miriam.
Yeah, that's it. Miriam the medium, sorry, yeah. But she won't share it with Yaz, and Yaz feels quite affronted by that. And I think that's so true of the character, because she also kind of wants to, she's always, like we said, just kind of shut herself off a bit. Doesn't want Yaz to be burdened by any of this stuff. Doesn't want to change what she's got with her, negatively. But in doing so, sometimes ends up treating Yaz pretty badly in comparison to how she treats more casual acquaintances who she's only ever going to meet once. And I think that's a truism through relationships sometimes.
It was something that I sort of saw in the 13th Doctor episodes, and I think it's such an interesting thing. It's like it would mean too much to share that with Yaz. It's too vulnerable to share that with Yaz. But letting a stranger look inside her head, especially if there's a calculated reason for it, because it's going to save the world, is easy to do, but it's hard to share it with Yaz.
That's really interesting with that. Yeah, that's great.
It's a powerful piece. I mean, the whole thing, sort of dealing with grief. Was that where you wanted the story to go, or did it kind of develop as you started writing it? Was it all self-contained, or was it organic?
I think there was a few different, because the way that we did it was we all, I think, pitched several ideas. And I had said to Noga and Matt, the producers, I'd quite like to do a historical one
Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask how you got involved with Big Finish, and then I think that will sort of lead into that process, and rather than
so unprofessional, Jeff.
Otherwise, it gets too timey-wimey, and we go from front to back.
How I got involved? Yeah, so it's not the first Big Finish I've done, because I've written for the Torchwood range as well. And I got involved in the Torchwood range through someone I know from theatre, who's Lauren Mooney, who's written many brilliant Big Finish episodes, and she script editing the Torchwood range at the time, and she sort of approached me, basically went, "Raph, you're a nerd. Do you did you ever watch Torchwood?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely."
Not half, mate.
So that one that went from there. And that was interesting, because that was quite a different editorial process to the 13th Doctor, because Torchwood has a more specific tone to it. So it's a smaller target to hit. So it went a lot more back and forth on the kind of the outline and stuff for that. But that is incredibly useful as a writer to have those firm parameters. And then the 13th Doctor, Noga, who's producing the series, I again knew her through the world of theatre. And I weirdly even had taught a kind of class on writing for audio at the drama school where she was doing her writing MA. So I actually kind of ended up doing a class where I was teaching her audio writing. I think that's something like, you already know all this. And then she approached me and sort of said, I'm producing a Big Finish range. I can't tell you what it is yet, but would you be interested? And I was like, I'd love to write Big Finish again. And then she said it was the 13th Doctor, and I was absolutely over the moon.
Really? Wow. Yeah.
To get like Jodie and Mandip to come back so quickly as well, and to be in that first box set was amazing. But exactly because Doctor Who has so much more scope to it, it's much more of a free-for-all over kind of pitching ideas. And I wanted to do a historical, because I think it is interesting when the Doctor is not a white man, basically, to see how they're impacted moving through the world.
And you did a bit more of that in this one, when they get catcalled and stuff like that, and there was quite a few little lines kind of referencing the Doctor being a woman in that time period. And there's a bit where they talk to a guy, and he's confused. He's a bit surprised that Yaz is a policewoman, isn't he? Something along those lines. So I noticed there was a sort of quite strong element of all that, which I thought was good, because the show didn't do an enormous amount on that sort of thing. It did a little bit in the Witchfinders and stuff, and there's comments here and there, but I really quite like that you kind of went into that a little bit more.
No, and I get it, because it's always a balance with with the TV show, which is obviously angled towards a younger audience, and it's just kind of it would be, I think, like not a great viewing experience for anyone to constantly see a Doctor wrangling misogyny or racism, but I do think there's scope to explore it. especially, and it's in a way easier to do it in a historical setting that is closer to the present.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you send her into kind of the far reaches of the past, almost all bets are off. We sort of, because again, it's so alien. I know one of the other ones in the range was with Eleanor of Aquitaine. So, kind of going into the far past, it's always different, sort of going, well, actually 100 years ago, we have quite a good idea of what these attitudes would have been like.
Yeah.
We know we have the history of the police force at that point, and if a woman was calling herself a doctor at this point, how people might respond to that. So it's kind of it's easier to weave those things in, and then of course you are relying on the natural charisma and confidence and intelligence and authority of the Doctor to get them to
win through.
It doesn't come grinding to a halt, basically.
So did you pitch, you pitch a handful of different ideas or like you were saying, it's a bit more of a free-for-all. Is there any kind of, we want this, or, do you just pitch the ideas out and they pick something and it starts to kind of take shape to fit within the bigger picture a bit more, like you've got the quite heavy tourist section, towards the end as well?
Yeah, I pitched a few ideas, but I think I always knew it was going to be this one because I think just from the way I wrote them up, it was pretty obvious that this
was this like a 6-page treatment and the others were like half a paragraph.
Could do
that, yeah.
Or I guess they could do this.
Yes. Yeah, Hastily looks around for something else you might have written.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the other ones I pitched was I was like, or women's football in the First World War. That's that's interesting. Which it is interesting, but
I would like to see
my daughter would be up
doing
for that
one.
My daughter's mad on football, women's football particularly. She would love that. She would snap it up.
I'd love to see more about that because that is an absolutely fascinating bit of history. But I think it was obviously this was, and also because I'd come across some of my research for this episode, I did for the episode, but I'd already kind of come across the core things that we talked about that I found so interesting about this period were already in my head. And the idea of it as particularly the spiritualist revival of kind of the Victorian age of seances and mediums, where actually it's quite a female dominated thing, and then you get to this period of time, there's a spiritualist revival. Obviously there are still mediums who are female who figure very prominently in the script for this this one, but there is also things like the Society for Psychical Research, which actually still exists today, which is sort of trying to more scientifically document paranormal phenomena. And again, it was just that meeting point of like ghosts and science that I thought felt brilliant and very, very Doctor Who-y. And then if you are writing about ghosts, you are writing about grief and you are writing about memory, especially in this period where London is just full of ghosts. Where everyone has kind of lost someone.
So it all kind of clicks into place as well. And I guess also, because I mean, you mentioned that you really like the X-Files, and it kind of plays into that sort of vibe as well, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the X-Files, I think, like, phenomenal show about faith, essentially. That's two main characters.
Yeah.
Different versions of what faith means to them. And it's all about trying to find answer. Is the truth out there?
Yeah. Trust no one.
It's talking about. It's just reminding me that was it maybe the last time we had a sort of séance. On screen in Who was with Eccleston, where he dropped one of the still best Doctor Who jokes, where he says, "I love a happy medium."
So good. Yes, it's the Unquiet Dead, isn't
That's it?
Yeah, which I think I literally in my pitch was like, so we're going to try and make this not too much like the Unquiet Dead, but it's obviously going to be there in the
but it would be by any sort of featuring of seances and mediums and stuff. It's it's sort of the ghosty type thing, isn't it? You can't help but have it thematically similar like that. But
I think this is also a thing with Doctor Who, is kind of almost anything you come up with is going to echo something that's already happened, and I think that's a feature, not a bug. I think the idea of this space-time adventurer who has been through so many things, to borrow another George Lucasism, really, it kind of it rhymes. It starts to rhyme all of the experiences of the Doctor. They kind of start
Yeah,
those
yeah.
frosty
And
patterns.
and the
Like
thing
a
as
like a
fans,
resonance.
we like to sort of
See these things, pick them out, little Easter eggs, or almost,
yeah,
aren't they?
like and mash episodes together a bit. Oh, it's a bit like so and so meets so and so as an episode. You know what I mean? Like
Completely.
or anything really. Like Orphan 55 is Aliens meets the Truman Show.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think even I feel like I am so influenced by Doctor Who generally and things like that. I mean, there's been I think a number of times when I've kind of written something and gone, "Oh, is that my idea?" And then gone, "Oh no, that's Doctor Who. That's
Bit of
Which
Doctor Who in
Doctor
that,
Who?
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like, I know that you can with the Violet Hour sort of. You probably trace the family tree of its influences just from within Doctor Who.
But that's part of the fun of it, you know, is writing your kind of jigsaw piece within
your
that bigger
contribution
puzzle.
to
You know,
that
it's going to
stuff,
have bits of the rest of the pattern in it, but it's your unique shape and piece of it. It's still not anybody else's. Just belongs to the whole. But I tell you who I absolutely love in this is Mr. Kidney.
Yeah.
I mean, did that character just appear, or
his trainers
that
melted, which is so 13.
and
I
the voice, the
absolutely
way he's
loved
played
it.
as well.
Yeah.
I love Mr.
And
Kidney.
then-
I was saying to Jeff in the review, it's almost like I could picture that character in a League of Gentlemen sketch or something, you know.
And then he gets back with Mal Travers later, and there's this sort of little throwaway line about changing the shoes or something, because they got melted earlier.
That was one of the ones where I think I wrote down Mr. Kidney as the name of the character, and then went, I'm not really going to call him Mr. Kidney, though.
Yes,
am
you
I?
are.
No, I am. I'm absolutely going to call him Mr. Kidney. I am. I think you're absolutely right about League of Gentlemen. It's completely that kind of. And I think again that was something where with an actor just kind of elevating something that you've written. I think I wrote because you give a little steer on voice for each character, and I think I'd written kind of he's either kind of lower middle class pretending to be more, or he's kind of upper middle class who's come down in the world.
Yeah.
But there's a sort of shift there in some kind of weird nebulous British nuance kind of class status where he's not quite where he thought he would be or where he feels he's supposed to be. And yeah, I think that comes across so well. That sort of faux genteel thing.
Yeah. And Mal Travers is an interesting character as well because he's sort of classic Who baddie type material, and then you find out that he's trying to see his wife and child again, and you have empathy for him, but he's going about it all in the wrong way, isn't he? And so that's
good intentions, bad
poorly
execution.
done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in the way that pretty much all of the characters in this are kind of refractions or reflections of what grief can do to people. Mal Travers is an extreme end of things where almost a kind of absolute denial essentially leads him down this path. And it sounds trite to say, but it's obviously always more interesting to write villains where you're trying to understand them as completely as possible. And I think the best villains are the ones where you're going, well, there, but for the grace of God, go on. If I had access to X, Y, and Z resources, and I had lost everyone who was closest to me, what would I try and do?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully not that, and a combination of that and him being a real product of his time and circumstances of kind of he's an empire man. He's sort of he's all about kind of shaping the world to his will.
But the whole of society has kind of been shaped to allow him to be that person anyway, isn't it? It's that self-defeating or self-energizing circle of what it is. So it's but yeah, he's definitely a very interesting character because it's like Jeff says, you want him to be defeated. He's the force that has to be stopped, and yet in doing so, the Doctor has to take something away from him. It reduces humanity in some way. Where you could argue that he's only doing something that's human, admittedly in a bad way, but it's part of the human condition to make mistakes. doesn't mean to say they should be forgiven, but I like that sort of grey area, and it kind of fits with the title, The Violet Hour, in which things are always kind of shifting in some, almost like a sort of waveform of various possibilities that become locked with the Doctor's presence within them. You know,
I love that way of it. Yeah, it's. I mean, I think feels truer to life in that, you know, actually we sort of want people who do bad things to be monsters, and it's much harder to look at the fact that actually people who do bad things are extremely human, and the bad things they are doing are part of the spectrum of human behaviour, and you know, that's why it's so difficult to kind of reckon with what is justice, what would justice be for things, and you know, kind of left it in a place where he doesn't get the death that like some Doctor Who villain.
No, that's right.
Because that'd be an easier way out. But we hope. I don't know. I kind of feel like it's none of my business what happens beyond the end of something that I write. That's kind of that's for you. But he's left in a place where we hope that there will be there will be some kind of justice for the women that he's murdered.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, can I ask about the Violet Hour as a title? We talked about it briefly earlier, but what does it mean, and what does it mean to you? Because we looked it up, didn't we, Paul? And I found a description. It was like, you know, the time when you know, the barrier between worlds is thinner, and you know, there's that sort of potential to cross over and see to the other side, which is, you know, quite applicable to it. But is that what you meant with the title, or you know, did you have a different sort of reasoning behind calling it this?
I don't think I meant any kind of one thing with it. It is a kind of more of a vibe of a title, absolutely. Like it takes you away, or kind of, you know, which is probably my favourite one. I'm sure you can tell. So they're like, you know, one of my favourite ones from the 13th Doctor era, kind of, you know, where it's giving you a flavour of what's happening rather than a direct description. But absolutely what you said, you know, I think what you said about it's this twilight time when the kind of the demimonde, the kind of the underworld is feels more accessible and reachable, and that kind of is important for a lot of the episode takes place after dark. You know, these are characters who inhabit the shadowy places of London. This is especially, you know, when we think about the 20s, we very often think about bright young things and flappers and roaring 20s and golden glitter. But there's a lot happening in the shadows and in the kind of the underbelly of things, which is almost entirely where this episode takes place, and in the seedy music halls and kind of, you know, and on the fringes of things. So I think it felt like, as you know, as I said, it's a line from the Wasteland, but it felt like a good way of evoking all of those, use a favourite writer word, all of those kind of liminal things that are kind of things creeping in at the edges.
Yes, and like you said, you know, there's a lot of ghosts around at that time, you know, so it's almost like you kind of feel the pull through the veil, right? So
let's talk about a big moment in the audio. So I woke up on the day when this had gone out, and I thought, oh yeah, I must download that later, and I'll listen to it. And I looked at Twitter. Thasmin Nation Wake Up was everywhere, and I was like, oh, what's this? And it was kissy kissy, and I was like, oh, what's this? Then I realised what it was talking about. I was like, oh, okay, well, this is interesting. And people were going kind of bonkers, really.
Because they didn't quite in the show, did they? And we asked Chris, should they have kissed? And he's like, well, they could have done.
Yeah.
But he decided that they weren't going to. So
yeah.
I mean, what this is that I naively was not expecting that strength of reaction to it, honestly.
Oh, really?
Like, again, no grab producer. She did warn me. She was like the Thasmin fans are going to go insane for this. But to me, it was an entirely organic thing to do. Because I grew up on the revival series where almost the rule is you get one, not really a kiss between Doctor companion. Like, you get one each time, and there's always something timey-wimey or sciencey to kind of explain it away, but it's also revealing something of character in that moment. So I hope that is what that moment was doing. It absolutely felt to me, it is a thing that I love about the 13 and Yaz relationship. With like, it is a love story in any definition of that, as I think are most Doctor companion relationships are love stories without that necessarily being sexual or romantic as we would understand it. Like, they are romances in the sense of two people sort of becoming obsessed with each other and
looking out for each other
in each other's worlds.
Yeah, because I really kind of felt that with Yaz, when they said you need to do something to kind of surprise her, it really felt like you could always kind of hear the light bulb going off in her head, like, oh, this might do it. Did you sort of propose that idea, or did Noga or someone else, and did it have to kind of go any higher to get cleared to happen, in terms of, like, do you know what I mean? It's such a big...
Was it like alarm bells are ringing everywhere throughout the BBC? They're going to kiss, kiss. Oh, is this signed off?
Honestly, I just wrote it. Because also, there are other sort of sapphic relationships that are kind of hinted at in the episode, with Nellie, who is kind of hinted to have been like romantically involved in Esther, with Esther who has died. And then obviously Miriam is Esther's sister, but Miriam and Nellie are maybe sort of getting close by the end of it. So it also, and Violet is also a kind of a colour with a significance in queer history as well. We talk about kind of lavender marriages and things. So that kind of, it also, again, Violet, that sort of combination of red and blue or pink and blue, that sort of suggests something somewhere, especially at this period of time, kind of beyond maybe the binaries of kind of what was expected in relationships. So again, to me, I was like, this is on theme within the episode. This is an organic moment for this to happen. I'm just going to write it. I was fully prepared for someone to tell me no.
Really?
But they didn't. They didn't, and just kind of did it. And then
because it works.
And then the next thing, and then
right.
the episode comes out, and people were sending me screen caps of the Radio Times going, years.
I think it's probably fair to say you make quite a lot of people very happy, even happier than they would have been with the audio anyway. So did you go down to the recording when Jodie and Mandip were there, or did you Zoom call in or something?
I did. I was there, which was great, because when we recorded my Torchwood episode, I couldn't make it, so it was really, really lovely to be there. Jodie was there. Mandip was not there that day. She actually, for this episode, recorded her line separately for this one. But we had a fantastic actor who's kind of filling in for Mandip, so you have someone, because so much about pacing and being able to bounce off each other. And then I knew the two actors who were playing Miriam and Nellie as well.
Oh, right.
But the actor who playing Miriam is in fact my sister, Olivia Marcus, which I didn't know about until the day before. So
really?
It's not nepotism. This is literally, she's a very good actor. And she called me up and said, I'm going to record this Doctor Who script tomorrow. Is this yours?
It's yours. It's got your name on it. Why is that? How did that happen?
and it's partly because those, not Nellie so much, but the actor playing Esther. Esther and Miriam are sort of coded as being Jewish characters in the Jewish EastEnders.
Yeah, someone dropped out, didn't they, at short notice as well? It said on the behind the
Liv,
scenes.
who was playing Esther, stepped in at short notice. Who I already knew.
Olivia Marcus. It never occurred to me.
There
you go. It's right there, hidden in plain sight.
Yeah.
So, which was then very special to have written something that is so much about sisters, even though like one of them is dead and one of them is alive, and then have my own sister playing this role, which was sort of beautiful to hear. And like, even it was Phil's kind of braggy saying it about your homework, but we were all crying when they recorded that kind of the final scene of the episode. So it was, I love I loved being there and also because I was like, well, my work is essentially done, so I just had to kind of
sit
relax
back and watch it.
everyone else
can watch godlike across the cast. But I remember remarking in our review of this, I thought Olivia was great, absolutely, because throughout Doctor Who and a lot of other kind of TV shows as well. I don't know if it's a thing that just seems to happen from time to time, but it's when it's almost like that Oliver Twist thing. All right, Governor, how's it going? That kind of thing, which sounds so fake. But it's Miriam's character lived and breathed and felt utterly 100% real, like she existed within that world. And so much of that, is from the performance, which just felt utterly genuine. So tell it from me, it's absolutely stunning, because it's very rare that Jeff will back me up, it's very rare that I feel like when I'm listening to things, it's almost like there's a little fakery detector goes off. Oh yeah, they should be in EastEnders, not this.
He's got a heart of stone.
It's that.
I will tell her, and I'm thrilled because I do remember, when, like I said, you sit down and you write a little description of each character to steer on the vocal performance. And I was like, oh, have I made an error here writing something that has quite so many kind of Cockney East End voices in it? Because I said it's one that can go wrong very easily. But
absolutely, but it didn't. It felt utterly genuine, so I loved it for that, for sure.
So you had to include, some of the tourist stuff in this as well. So, were there some specific requirements, or did you just sort of have to get to an end point on it? Because it all it all pays off a bit more in the next episode. But is that it's a 12-episode season, isn't it? Here, so I'm guessing that the 6th episode is not the end of everything. Well, maybe you can't tell us.
Point when everything twists around, Jeff.
No one can tell us anything when we talk to Big Finish people, can they?
and nor can I. But certainly, it is set up for the next episode. Yes, absolutely. Which you will hear more when, and that is Noga's episode next when it comes up. But it was purely actually because of the positioning of this episode. So they decided that this was going to be number 5 of 6, and went, well, 6 is going to act as the kind of the finale to this box set. Obviously, it's going to kind of bring so we will have had this tourist thing bubbling along. So we'd love more of an appearance of the tourist in the penultimate episode. So that was a kind of suggestion from above, if you like, of sort of going, oh, well, we want you, because you've sort of got this psychic thing going on in the episode. Would that be a way of getting the tourist to appear? But because also the tourist is sort of being worked out, this is the most you've heard of the tourist to date. Kind of there was a bit of a back and forth where I was kind of writing things and going, is this right? Is this the right kind of tone? Is this the right kind of voice? And sort of almost going off of just sort of clues that I was trying to glean from Noga, but she okayed it. So I presume it's out now.
Yeah, well, I was already excited to find out about the tourist right from Vampire Weekend and the mention there. So now we're, had these sort of breadcrumbs dropped, and now it's all gonna kick off next time.
You love a breadcrumb trail.
Yeah, I do. I like a good arc that plays off across a period of time.
I'm a real, as I said, grew up on Doctor Who revival. You get to have one not kiss, and you get an arc word that goes through the season.
Yeah.
Those are the rules.
That's the rules. That's them rules. That's exactly how it works. Would you like to come back to these characters and do kind of sequel, or pick them up in some other way, or do you think that's it now? I've done that.
Or just another 13 adventure, or
that's a different question, Jeff.
It is, but with maybe without using words. Can you answer? Are you doing more?
I mean, I'm not currently contracted to do any more. But I would love to do more 13 in the future if the box sets go on. There are other things, because maybe I'll do women's football next time. But there are many stories to tell, I think, with this iteration of the character. I think especially because of, like we said, that kind of inherent contradiction that she that she contains and kind of getting. And there's also something so interesting and challenging as a writer about kind of knowing what the end point of a character is and kind of having to write in the gap.
Yeah.
Which is also what my Torchwood episode, I wanted to write an episode about Susie who dies in the first episode of Torchwood.
Yeah.
I was like, it's got everything is informed by the fact that we already know what happens to this character. So yeah, I would love to write some more 13 at some point. In terms of the characters in this, I think that's that.
They're done. Right?
They're done. But like, there are obviously more adventures, I think, ahead for a young woman who can speak to the dead in 20s London. But feel free to imagine what those might be.
Oh, Mr. Kidney.
Yeah.
Hey.
Mr. Kidney. Hunting down Mr. Kidney and bringing him to justice.
Yeah. Well,
the return of Mr. Kidney, or the unfortunate tragedy of Mr. Kidney's final year. Well, I don't know. Oh, that's great. It's a wonderful story. I mean, we've been loving these Big Finish adventures for the 13th Doctor, haven't we? Because we just wanted more off her, really. We love the 13th Doctor.
Yeah, and the fact that, they've been genuinely so good, across the whole lot so far. And, I can't remember if you asked me, Paul, but my bias would have meant I'd have said that anyway. But they are genuinely, they are that good, and we've both listened multiple times to them, to each of them. So, I'm hoping that after this initial 12, it all carries on for a good long while.
I think this is what the gift of the Big Finish audios is in general, isn't it? It's like you get more of it, and I think the specific draw, especially for me for this one, was when they sort of said, okay, we're going to do 13th Doctor audios. Like we're still kind of waiting to confirm who the other characters are going to be. We don't know yet. And then eventually they were like, it is going to be Yaz. And I was so over the moon because I remember that brief period, that was like a brief second there where I was like, oh my God, are we getting an all lady TARDIS for the first time? And then we had John Bishop, who was
but for that moment, it was just
the beginning of Halloween Apocalypse. It was the two of them, yeah. So what else are you working on at the moment, and what should people look out for in the near future?
So boringly, I'm working on loads of stuff that I can't talk about.
What is that happen with every big...
the worst possible answer. I am working, but actually something that you absolutely, especially in the audio space, can look out for is later this year, the second series of narrative audio podcast called Thrice Forgotten is coming out, which I wrote on the first series and I directed the first series, and I am co-writing the second series, not directing it this time, but that is a podcast with Rusty Quill, who are most famous for the Magnus Archives, and created by a very brilliant writer called Nemo Martin, and it is essentially about set in a kind of non-specific year in the 1800s, with a band of sort of mostly scientists who are kind of being forced to be pirates, and it is a sort of and it's in a grand tradition of the nautical seafaring adventure, but all of our characters are basically not white and not straight, and it's kind of what happens. We put those characters into the kind of Jules Verne type, again, rollicking seafaring adventure, and where they kind of really just want to be merchants or scientists or explorers, and kind of end up drifting back into piracy at every turn.
Yeah, I'm just looking it up. Yeah, this looks...
There's a first series that's already out there, right? Where can we find this?
So anywhere you get your podcasts.
There you go.
The first series, we did the first series a couple of years ago, and it's taken a while, but I'm absolutely thrilled we do get to get our second series.
I'll have a listen to that, Great. Right, Paul, would you like to cue up our little theme tune?
Indeed. Let's launch into this, ladies and gentlemen. The Time Space Visualiser is on its way. Oh, yes.
The Time Space Visualiser.
Told you it was good, didn't I?
Always gets people that. It's amazing. It's very emotional. It gets me right there. So this is the section of the show where we ask our guests and maybe divulge ourselves. What else have we been doing, indulging ourselves in, whether in game formats, whether it's another TV show, radio show, whatever it is. But the only criteria is it's got nothing to do with Doctor Who. So, Rafaela, what else have you been into? What have you been watching that's been floating your boat?
I have been playing a video game a few years ago called Chants of Sanaa. Chants as in like chanting, like chanting, chants.
Got it, yeah.
Sanaa, which I think is 2 N's and 2 A's, which is a video game where you're a little guy running around a temple and there are people in the temple who do not speak the same language as you. They speak in glyphs, and you have to decipher. It's basically a linguistic puzzles video game. You decipher what it is as you go along, and then a wider story kind of starts to unfold. So if you are into kind of linguistics, hieroglyphs, kind of, it's got some sort of chase and stealth elements to it as well. But mainly it is you are trying to translate an ancient forgotten language as you go. With your little notebook, writing down your kind of pictograms, and it will every so often confirm whether you're on the right track or not. And I absolutely loved it. It looks beautiful.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, the graphics are they're sort of simple, but the colours and style of it.
What's that? Is that an indie? Is that an indie game? Is it? Or
it's on the
script?
I came across it because I'm working in a writer's room recently, where we which kind of had where the project had a bit to do with kind of riddles and puzzles, and we were talking about some fun kind of linguistic things, and I went, I wonder if there's literally any video games or any games I can play that
does that.
That experience of trying to decipher something, and I found this, and it's absolutely perfect. I had such a good time playing it.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Yeah, let's try
that must street.
Yeah, you should try that.
Yeah. What about you, Jeff? What have you been up to?
I started watching the new Naked Gun last night with Liam Neeson.
Is it good? Or is it?
I was laughing a lot. I felt that it really captured the sort of clever, dumb humour that those films have. You know, you might have seen in the trailer, there's a bit where he says to Pamela Anderson, please take a seat. And then she says, no, I've got plenty at home. And that is so stupid.
Yeah.
And there's a bit where he's fighting some baddies, and then it cuts to a bit, and there's like a sign that says, now serving, and the numbers tick over as he's punching these guys, and they're all lining up to serve him. Then he honks the guy's nipples, and it goes like this. And I'd heard it was either like really funny or really poor with a few decent jokes, but actually I was quite loudly laughing through it.
That's all you need, mate.
When we finish tonight, I'm gonna go and finish it. I was really enjoying it. Yeah, it was good.
Oh, that's all fun. So I've been watching Starfleet Academy, which I've only just started getting into. I'm on like episode 5 or 6.
Oh, they've canned
and I
it
just
already.
found out yesterday that it's cancelled. Yeah. I don't know. Whatever. Do you know what? I mean, if they cancelled every Star Trek show after, go back into it. If they cancelled every Star Trek after 2 series, none of them would ever go. I mean, it stands to reason. It's getting late, so my words are tripping over themselves. But when you think like the Next Generation really started getting to its stride in sort of series 3, season 4, and what have you, it takes 2 series of any Star Trek show to find its own place in the world, to figure out what the story is it wants to tell. The first 2 series are always kind of up in the air. They're trying a few things, some work, some don't. Characters might change as they kind of go and redefine themselves in some way, and then the core of the show starts to bleed through by series 3. But this one hasn't even had the chance to do that, so I'm gutted because I was actually kind of enjoying it. So yeah, I'm annoyed about that, really. So when we finish this, I'm going to go and watch the next episode, and I'm just going to replay them just to annoy people and try and get the viewing figures up by 3 more or something.
I haven't watched any of Starfleet Academy, but I have been watching Strange New World, which I think they are at least finishing that one on its own terms.
Yeah, exactly.
The series, and then we're done, which makes sense for essentially a prequel series. But No, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of sort of, should we say, negative comments on Starfleet Academy, usually from people even older than me who say it's not Star Trek anymore. It don't have anything that I remember the Star Trek when I was a boy. No, it's because you've forgotten all that, mate.
I think I saw didn't Shatner tweet about it? But basically telling him to shut up.
Yeah, well, he said, look, if Twitter had been around when Star Trek was out, we'd have been called, woke DEI nonsense, blah 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 blah, and they'd have pulled us. In fact, a lot of the southern states, he reckons, in America actually did want to pull Star Trek because shock horror. There was an on-screen kiss between a white guy and a black woman. It's crazy. It's I think people forget what's really important, about being human. Yeah, we're all on the same planet, man.
And
it's just
we all know that what's important is Doctor Who.
Well, there you go. Just reduce it down to that, Jeff. There.
Doctor Who, or just complaining about Doctor Who, really is the thing.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Yeah,
two sides of the fandom, aren't there? Enjoying it or complaining about it. Pick your camp.
And on that note, let's leave it there then, shall we? So, RAFAELLA Marcus, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute delight. Pleasure.
This has been a while in the planning, hasn't it? We spoke some weeks ago, didn't we, to sort this out. So thanks for being patient and sticking with us as well, because we said, we'll wait till the audio comes out, so we've got, we can talk about it. So yeah.
I think your email's how I knew when it was coming out, because
I think it was actually.
You emailed on the day and said it's got a release date now, and I was like, oh great.
Yeah.
But
it's funny because I saw Mandip and Jodie were at a con at the weekend of the one before, and they didn't know it had come out either, and someone asked about the kiss and stuff, and so it's funny. I guess, like with a lot of work, you do it and you don't necessarily know when it's coming out again because you move on and blah blah blah. So yeah, it's quite funny that they hadn't expected that that sort of reaction to come to them so soon.
It was a perfect storm of timing.
Brilliant.
You should never Google anything you write, that way madness lies. But I've seen some of the Thasmin Twitter response to it, and saw people going, I'm going to ask them about it this weekend. I was like, what have I done? I'm sorry, Jodie and Amanda, but also I know that you're fans. So.
Sorry, not sorry. Yeah,
sorry, not sorry. There you go. Brilliant stuff. As
thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. If you've been listening, thank you for watching. And RAFAELLA Marcus, thank you once again for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure and a delight. I wish you all the very best success in everything you do.
Well, hopefully we'll get a chance to talk Who again in the future as well with you.
Indeed.
Brilliant. All right, thanks everyone. See you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.